So, I am so happy to welcome you to today's online discussion about confidence and emotional mastery at work. During this 1 hour that we'll be together, we'll gain a deeper insight into your emotional intelligence and learn how to leverage it to your advantage in the workplace. As a transformational mindset coach and somatic stress release practitioner, Lizzie helps professionals build confidence and regulate their emotions and build resilience to thrive in their careers. So Lizzie has prepared some slides which she will share with us. But you're welcome to use the chat or even unmute yourself if you would like to ask any questions, but we'll make sure that we will do a Q&A at the end. So I hope you enjoy the talk, ladies, and Lizzie, over to you.
Thank you so much. I am just going to share my screen and hope that you can all see that. Wonderful. Okay. I know you've all had a busy day, so give yourself a breath, give yourself time to come to this moment and be a bit more present. So to begin, those of you who I can see your faces right now, I would love to hear how you are feeling. So you just want to add one line, one word into the chat box, how you're feeling right now. Just a quick little check-in with yourself. I'm sure you haven't had a moment to do that just yet. So just one word and we can just gauge how everyone's feeling. I know Claire. Oh, Claire's feeling tired. That's okay. It's only Tuesday, but feeling a bit tired, feeling a bit overwhelmed. Thank you for being so honest, Nicola. I like that. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, well, I'll read them as they come. Tired, yes, that's an emotion. Absolutely, yeah. So today we are going to be talking about confidence and emotional mastery in the workplace. So bear with me whilst I get used to these slides. There we go. Quick slide up. So we're going to be understanding a bit more about confidence and emotional mastery and how that really connects into the workplace. These are huge topics. So we are just going to bring some awareness. And what I always like to remind us in workshops like this is a lot of these stuff you might already know or have some sort of awareness of, but this is a perfect time to reflect into yourself and really check in and say like, hey, what's working? What am I already doing quite naturally, and what can I enhance? And then bring some light onto things that perhaps don't feel so good. So ways that you are reacting or responding not quite how you want and a bit triggering, and how we can find ways and think of ways that can work for you to overcome those. So with that, we're going to be building self-trust and confidence in our decisions specifically. And hopefully by the end of this session, we're going to be feeling a little bit lighter and inspired to take action and manage those emotions with ease. But the reason that we are here, especially for workplace scenarios, is some statistics to kind of bring some context into the importance of these topics, is that women tend to underestimate their own abilities, as we know, in so many ways. So studies show that men will apply for a job if only they meet 60% of the qualifications, while most women will wait for 100% of that criteria to be met. But also specifically emotional intelligence itself is responsible for 58% of our professional success across all different industries. So it's so important for us to focus on that and develop this skill along with our kind of IQ and our deliverables in that way. And to introduce myself, my name is Lizzie. I am an accredited transformational coach, but I specialize in emotions. So emotional intelligence and resilience, really building up that stress tolerance in the workplace, and specifically so in somatics. And somatics means the body, the living body. So today I'm really going to integrate some tools of how to connect into your body, out of your mind, out of the story and the narrative that we really fixate on, and tune into what our body is telling us and that information and how we can use that to our advantage. So I've been coaching for a few years, but prior to that, I was in the corporate space for many years. So I was working in startups, travel technology, and yeah, high-paced, intense environments. So now really using those experiences and challenges, let's say, into my work as a coach. So why I think you might be here is, we've already mentioned some of these emotions. So why you're here, you might be feeling overwhelmed by emotions. perhaps doubtful, judgmental, unsure of your own opinion at times. Sometimes might be avoiding conflict and putting others' needs before your own. And why you're really here, going into that deeper meaning why this is so important, is that you are really reducing your potential, both in work as well as your own life, and that wasting energy that actually could be spent elsewhere. So that overthinking and the self-doubt can be utilized, that energy can be utilized in different ways. All in all, it's not making you feel good by having these challenges in your life. It makes you feel exhausted, makes you feel frustrated, and it's a disconnection from what you actually even want. So if anybody can relate to any of these things, please use the chat box or unmute yourself at any stage if you have questions. So, but even a big like, yeah, I can relate, I'm feeling those things right now, or have noticed those moments come up. It might not be a consistent feeling, but you might have thought of, when I'm reading those words, connecting into certain examples that you resonate with. And how you want to be feeling is to have confidence in your decisions, trust in yourself, and let go of that actual physical anxiety, how that physically is showing up across your body in different ways. Making those decisions with authority, with speed and ease, so you can take more calculated risk and live your life to the full, so you can reach for those promotions, reach for those higher career progressive states. Saying no to things that aren't right for you, having more influence to lead and inspire. A big one here, getting paid more. Not only getting paid more, but getting paid what you actually deserve. As well as being more engaged and present and admired and respected. So if any of those, again, are resonating with you, you can either nod along so I can see like, yeah, I resonate, or dropping in the chat box. Thanks for this, it's so relevant. Yes, it absolutely is. It's such a great reminder and a refresher of why this is so important, to really just give yourself a bit of space to focus on these topics. So just for a second, before we jump into the juicy stuff, let's take a breath. So if we first want to have our feet flat on the floor, so you're really grounding into your seat and just making sure your like sit bones are the pointy bit on your bum, basically, and into your seat, and rolling those shoulders down and just really releasing that tension with intention. And specifically releasing any tension that you have around your jaw. I often do it subconsciously, gritting my teeth or holding it in my jaw. So just try and relax that mouth, try and relax that tongue in your mouth, and just kind of easing into this present moment here. And closing down your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. Or if not, just have a resting gaze just for a few seconds. And I want your mind to wander as I ask you these questions. What's those first things that really come up when we're thinking about confidence? So if you had full confidence in your decisions, how would your work life be different? And now thinking into the future, if you had full confidence in your decisions, how would your future be different? And with that full confidence, what would it allow you to do that you're not currently doing? Wonderful. And just taking a final deep sigh, releasing any tension and any excess breath, and slowly opening your eyes once more. Coming back to the present room in the moment. How did that feel for you? What were the things that were coming up? If anybody wants to unmute themselves and share, I'd love to hear. or just clear your throat. Or if you want to write in the chat box and share what that felt like. Equally, it's okay just to kind of sit with that as well. Maybe write it down. It might be something you can come back to later on, but it's that first questioning, it's that first connection into yourself before we move into the theory and the kind of, okay, what should we be doing next, and that panic. It's coming back to ourselves, being like, okay, why am I here? What do I want? What is that vision? And what direction are we actually aiming toward? Okay. So, question for yourself first. What is confidence in a professional setting? What are people's thoughts on this? What are the first words or understanding of this that come to mind? Does anybody feel comfortable to share?
I'll share, Lizzie, if you can hear me.
Of course I can. Yeah, thank
Hi,
you.
this is Priscilla. I think for me, confidence in a professional setting is really about being able to be yourself, take, knowledge in your input, having an impact with your colleagues or your team that you're working with, and just really being your best self.
Wow. Big, powerful words you're using there, like impact, yourself, that power. Like, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. That was really, really insightful. Anyone else resonate with that or have anything else to add?
I'd say like the ability to sort of speak up and sort of be heard.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, and the ability to be speaking up, but also like being assertive about your thought process and not giving into what somebody else is saying more in a more pushy manner and just like holding on your own, right?
Yeah. Both of those things really, really connect into each other. So having that voice, but also being clear and strong when you are meet that pushback and meet that challenge, which we're going to face throughout life. So it's a really important skill to hone within confidence. Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So yeah, my understanding of confidence, especially in a professional setting, goes between that inner confidence and outer confidence. So first of all, confidence can be defined as the belief in one's abilities and qualities to succeed in a given situation. Cambridge Dictionary, perfect, thank you. Whereas the inner confidence, and that is really around our self-confidence. So it's what's going on in our head. It's that ability to stand up. It's to have that voice, to take the action and believe that you are able to do that. Versus that external confidence, which is how others perceive you. And to be honest, I think this part is really relevant to just have an awareness of, especially in the workplace. We can all say like, oh, I don't care what other people think about me. But in a workplace setting, we'd be wrong, because it is important, especially in this emotional intelligence kind of outlook. It's important to be able to connect with one another. It's important to see the impact that you have on other people, and having an awareness of both of those confidence capacities is equally as important. So confidence for me is really rooted in that self-awareness. So it's recognizing your strengths as well as your areas for growth. So linking this into a bit of neuroscience and a bit of understanding what's going on neurologically. So if anyone's heard of RAS, so RAS is the reticular activating system, aka it's how our brain filters information. So as we know, we've got thousands and thousands, if not millions of pieces of information each day. Your brain's working hard to filter what important information is able to be thought about. So how this connects in then with imposter syndrome. Like, let's not just ignore that classic phrase. As much as it kind of annoys me, it's still important to recognize that discomfort and that kind of self-doubt happens a lot more with women in the workplace than it does with others. And this really connects into that RAS, so that reticular activating system, your brain focusing on what information that it can find rather, to understand the situation. And for women more so, we often dwell upon those smaller, I want to say like errors, but smaller ways of it you could improve. So whether you've done something absolutely amazing, you'd still focus on that one thing and be like, oh, damn it, I didn't speak up clearly in that moment, or I like stumbled over my words, or that slide was wrong and it was out of order, even though the whole impact of the presentation was like stunning. So I'm sure it's a classic thing that we can all really relate to in some of these moments, but that's something, again, that we have to really catch ourselves. So it's whether we do it in a gratitude practice or focusing on those successes and wins after each moment, whether it's a small meeting, whether it's a big occasion, but really training your brain against that RAS, against focusing on that kind of negativity, to really move into the real evidence in itself. I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent then, but that's how confidence really connects into different ways into the workplace itself. So yeah, as I just mentioned there, a little bit more around imposter syndrome. But coming back to you guys, what do you think blocks most of your confidence at work? Has anyone got any moments that they want to share of like, oh, that doesn't feel too good to me, or I get really nervous, or I get overwhelmed, or build up something in my head that, yeah, happens in those moments? Anyone want to share?
I think sometimes when there's a lot going on, it's like feeling like just not doing things as well as I can. So the confidence in like, yeah, that sort of side of having too much.
No. Yeah, very, very common.
One of the things that I've observed is that I tend to go back to a point where things did not go very well, and like extrapolate that and exaggerate that, rather than, you know, on the occasions that things did go well. So even for future events, I'd be more, you know, in tune with what did not go well in a past event than what did go well at some occasion in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's very similar to what we were kind of just saying, of like really focusing on those like tiny little hiccups or little mistakes versus all the evidence that could be there elsewhere. Claire's just shared in the chat box, I had a bad experience in a previous job, so now I always have a fear that something bad will happen again, and that holds me back and gives me negative thoughts. And Priscilla has put fear of looking stupid. Thank you so much for everyone for just, again, being so vulnerable, openly sharing. And I think for the most important thing here is to connect with one another, because whatever example each of you are sharing, I'm sure we've either can resonate and relate to that exact moment, or have something be like, oh, I've got one 10 times worse. Like, we've all had those moments, but that kind of humanness that we are connecting here together. So let's think about how we can move through that and overcome it. So for me, thinking about confidence in a different angle is having the willingness to try. So confidence is sometimes kind of misrepresented, that it is something you either born with, something that you like, it's a feeling, you just kind of wait for it and be like, okay, I'm just wait till I'm confident and then I'll go for XYZ, I'll put myself forward for something. However, we need to flip that around, because confidence, like I said, is a willingness to try, but it's very much an action. So neuroscientists, again, coming back to the science of understanding how our brains are working and what's happening. So neuroscientists confirm that action is created by that positive feedback loop. So reinforcing learning, we're always building our confidence and building our competence. So we actually have to do the action and take take the first step, create that evidence before we can get the kind of the positive feedback from it. So once we've taken the action, then we've like, hey, we've survived this, we've done okay. And then we get that confirmation, and then we can move through into the next step of building that confidence. So each tiny little step is going to strengthen that brain's pathways and that evidence that the brain has to then encourage more action. So it's not going from one end of the scale to another. It's not going from I am lacking in confidence, then I'm going to have confidence by tomorrow. It's tiny, tiny little steps. And just thinking about that and breaking it down in that way of being like, okay, this isn't going to feel good. I'm going to have to step into that discomfort. But in doing so, I'm building up that evidence and I'm building up that action and how I can then strengthen that feedback loop that is happening. So the more evidence that I have. So that's really how that progress and development of confidence is actually made. You don't wait to feel ready. You take all the information, you take all the kind of, I'll go through into the how in a second, create all the right conditions to be able to take that very first step and then repeat. So how do we do that? The first stage is around strategy and planning. And what do I mean by that? For me, strategy helps you direct your energy efficiently. So it makes each action purposeful and aligned with your broader objectives. So that's really why a few minutes ago we were going into that kind of meditative state and thinking, okay, like, what is my confident self? Like, what direction am I taking myself? And what do I want in that future if I have that confident ability? Being clear with that, having that strategy and that clear focus. But bringing it back into a bit more tangible, practical ways of thinking about that. So if you are going into an important situation, whether that be a conversation or a meeting or delivering something in a certain scenario, you can plan, which won't eliminate uncertainty and it won't eliminate those feelings and those moments of self-doubt, but it gives yourself the best chance to structure it so you can help move forward confidently despite knowing all these unknowns. So what does that really look like? Planning means taking a bit of time before certain interactions, being clear with what your main headline is. So what is that main one thing that you are intending to put across in your communication? One thing, one headline. Knowing your data. So when your nervous system gets activated, we're flooded with cortisol, we're flooded with this kind of overstimulation. We're going to move through some practices in a second to calm that. But however, we can't ignore it when sometimes we just get flooded, our brain goes a bit blank. Being really clear and knowing your data and being clear with your facts is going to really help you in those situations. So having that headline, having a couple of pieces of data, and just being really clear with the facts. So simplifying the language and keeping things simple. So number one, strategy and planning. Number two is around calming your body to release excess energy. So like I just mentioned, calming that nervous system, often through things that I'm sure you will have heard of in many times over, whether that be mindfulness exercises or movement practices, grounding exercises, different breath work. By breath work, I really just mean breathing. I just mean like releasing the tension that we are holding in our chest or in our body. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that, but just ways to release that energy and that tension from your body. So from your body moving into a calmer state, then you can have clarity in your mind and you're acting from that place rather than from a place of fear and tension. I'm using my hands a lot today. I'm like using the hands before my words come out. I'm like tension. So this releasing that energy is really about creating that mental clarity, helping you move forward without that additional emotional strain. And then thirdly, stating your need and explaining your why. So hard conversations are always going to be hard. Let's not pretend that we're going to somehow come out of here with this huge level of confidence. We're always going to have a certain level of hard. And what I mean by hard is often especially in the workplace, is when you are stating your need or your boundary or your request, sometimes that is going to inconvenience the other person. All the people in this scenario aren't going to be getting exactly what they want, but that isn't to say that you can't put forward your request, put forward your need. So those hard conversations are okay to have. They're going to be hard, they might be uncomfortable, stating your need. But the second point there is the most important part, explaining your why. Because basically saying your because. So giving them the reason why that you're making that decision or that request, because then they can't argue with it. You've given it clarity, you've given the information, you've given the context of why this is important to you. Yes, and they can then question it. You can obviously go into conversation from there, but giving them enough information of saying what your need or request or why you're even saying this is, and then going into the why. I'm just going to pause there for a second, just let that kind of resonate and process. Does anyone have any questions or any input through any of those things that I just mentioned? I know that was quite a lot of information for a few minutes. It's also an excuse for me to just grab some water as well and take a breath. Wonderful. So yeah, so the final thing there that I put at the bottom is still taking action, even if you don't feel ready. So now we're going to move a bit more into that, focusing on that, even if you don't feel, because that feeling is hard. It's really difficult to move through. But confidence is that ability to be uncomfortable. So when we experience difficult feelings and difficult emotions, going into those hard moments, this isn't a cue to stop or look for the answer elsewhere and kind of panic into that difficult state. Instead, what we really must be starting to do is going inward. And by facing that discomfort rather than avoiding it, we are able to cultivate resilience. So resilience meaning that we are able to not only do that one hard thing, but we're able to do the next hard thing and recover from it much quicker with much more tools and simplicity. So how I often like to think about stress is something that we have to face day in, day out, and we always will for the rest of our lives. Sorry to break it to you, but it's something that we can navigate and move through. So where stress becomes, I guess, unmanageable is when we stay stuck in that kind of heightened moment. So instead of it coming through like a wave, we're peaking at that wave, but we're remaining in that. We're ruminating, we're repeating it, or we're not processing certain things and those emotions, and we're staying stuck in that stressful moment rather. So then when another stressor comes along, you're moving up to another wave, and very soon you're going to be tipping over that threshold. So that's why when someone or your child like does the smallest little thing, or your partner says one little comment later in the day and you just snap, and whether that's tears, whether that's anger, whether that's frustration, there's this huge emotion coming out, and then afterwards you're like, that doesn't connect. That level of reaction doesn't connect with the actual comment from your partner. Yes, it was annoying, but it didn't value that level of response. And that's really because we haven't moved through this stress cycle enough. So what we're wanting to be doing is acknowledging that stress, activating ourselves in the moment, but then continuing and moving through it. So we want to be flowing out the other side, moving back to baseline, so we can face the next stressor whenever it comes along. We can face that comment and not snap back, and we can handle ourselves, and it's going to be okay. So that's what I mean by different those stress cycles. It's around facing that discomfort and understanding what information we have there. So an exercise that I'm going to ask you to do to recognize this, especially in the workplace, is spotting your triggers. So this is something that is super, super helpful to bring in or heighten your self-awareness from basically calling out your own shit. We don't want to be a victim. We want to be taking responsibility, because the ability to take responsibility and understand ourselves, understand our own emotions, our own emotional reactions and responses, as well as taking responsibility for whatever we've said and done. That is the power, that is the strength. We don't have to always be this perfect person. So taking a few moments to yourself, if you are able to write these down, then do so. If you're still cooking dinner, you can think it through in your head and perhaps write them down later. But we're just going to take a few minutes now. So the task is a journaling kind of exercise. So to reflect on a recent incident where you felt an intense emotional reaction. And we're doing this for a work-based scenario. So thinking of something that's perhaps happened in the last few weeks that's quite like fresh in your mind. And it felt intense in that moment. You're reflecting on it and don't overthink it. Whatever that first scenario comes to mind is, that's perfect. So I want you to write down first what triggered your reaction. So what specifically was it in that moment that triggered that reaction? And then there's no rush, but I'm just going to read through the next couple of questions. The second question after that, so after what triggered your reaction, what was your initial emotional response? So I'm thinking of words here, like what words and emotions can you write down in that initial emotional response? There's no right or wrong here. I'm not going to ask you to share it as well. So it's all very personal. So be as honest as you can. And then finally, how did you handle it? Or how would you wish that you'd handled it as well? The second part of that, of how you wish you'd handled it, that's almost like less relevant so for now. More of it is just like how you did handling it, because we need to meet this with compassion as well. Like it doesn't matter how like upset or shameful that you feel about that emotional response or reaction. Like all of it is welcome, it's okay. It's just bringing awareness to that trigger and to that sequence of events and what that emotion was and really what that trigger was. And just the process of writing it out and separating it. So separating it from ruminating in your head and thinking it through to actually putting words on paper is really helpful to then move into the observation eye. So you're almost like separating yourself from the incident itself. Again, meeting it with compassion and just awareness. So you're just seeing, what am I aware of? What words am I now reading back to myself? Is anything surprising? Is anything perhaps quite common? Are there other perhaps instances that you're thinking of as well, being like, oh, I reacted that same way in that instance as well? But just spotting those triggers and connecting that through those sequence of events first. Just going to give you one more minute and then we'll move on. But of course, you can take a picture or a screenshot if you need these questions to continue later on. Amazing. Okay. I'm going to move on because time is ticking and we've got lots of important things to move through, but we will revisit that at the end. If you have questions or you want to share anything, we will absolutely come back to it. But for now, we are going to talk about emotional mastery. So what is it and why is it important in work? over to you, of course, first. What are your thoughts on emotional masteries? By that, I mean, like, understanding, recognizing, regulating your emotions, but why do you think it is important to have in the workplace? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to just quickly share, or if you want to just write, it's also fine. People might be busy typing, so I'm gonna, oh, here we go. Nicola's put to present as your best self, and Deepali has put to reduce reactionary behavior. Amazing. So it's that, yeah, version of yourself. You want to be able to be controlled and show your strengths and your best self. And then reducing that reactionary behavior, so having a bit more control and choosing how to respond. Amazing. So yeah, why is it important? High EQ, by EQ, I mean emotional intelligence. So high EQ employees really are able to handle conflict much more calmly, communicate effectively, and show resilience through those stressful times. So just like we were mentioning just before. And people with better emotional regulation are 31% more productive and tend to foster more positive workplace environments. So it's a very powerful skill that we need to practice, and something that we can absolutely grow and enhance and improve, which is great to know. So a bit of context on emotions before we jump into the kind of the practicality of these. So how are emotions constructed? My understanding of emotions are that they are constructed unconsciously from 3 ingredients. So the first is body budget. So we're thinking of ourselves as a battery. When we are full green light, full battery mode, what's been going on? You've probably had a really good sleep. You've had some good meals, some good nutrition. You've eaten consistently. Perhaps you've had some exercise, some connection, got hydrated. It's all the stuff we've been speaking about for years and years. We all know what we should be doing, but it's as simple as that. It's checking in. Where am I on that body budget scale in terms of that battery? Because when we are at that lower end of that scale, so we're thinking those orange, thinking those reds, lower end in that battery, our brain has less energy. So it has to work much harder to keep our thoughts and reactions balanced. AKA, when we're hungry, that's a real thing. Go and give the girl a snack. That's very simple for me, but it is as simple as that. It's also having a bit of compassion for yourself. So thinking back to that situation you've just written down in, what was your body budget in that sense? Has other things been impacting your sleep, your exercise routine? What else is going on? It's more of a check of like why this emotion is happening and at what scale it is because of this body budget. Secondly is your current situation. So by that, I mean your sensory input. So it's very much whatever's happening in front of us. We are taking in lots of different sensory inputs, whether that's the visual, the sound, the heat, the temperature, lots of different things. And you're interpreting that environment, and it's creating an emotional response within your body. However, one thing to note there is that everybody's perception of certain situations is completely unique. So if we take the example of public speaking, that is going to cause a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and a lot of tension for one person. However, for another, it might cause excitement. It might cause, I don't know, I haven't met those people before. There's much more people on that kind of fear end of the scale, but for some, it might cause excitement. So just to kind of have an awareness that it is perception that's creating that, your perception is unique and it's creating that emotional response from the situation. And thirdly, is that prediction from previous experience. So just as someone mentioned earlier, that their reaction to certain circumstances in work at the moment is very much, and they're aware of it, is very much being predicted and controlled by that previous experience from their former job or the former role. And the reason for this is that is constantly happening in our day-to-day life. Our brain is constantly guessing how best to react based on that stored information, even if the reaction doesn't accurately reflect the current reality. So even if you are much more skilled, if you are in a completely different role, much more supported team that aren't going to react in certain ways to whatever you're doing, to understand the reality of that and start to question it is really, really important. So your brain might automatically jump into a certain reaction, but it's our ability to question that which is really key. I'm going to go into that in a much more detailed step-by-step way in just a second. So moving on to, so now we'll just focus for the last 5 to 10 minutes on practical ways to enhance your emotional mastery. So I don't know if anyone's seen this amazing tool before. It is the emotions wheel. And you can super simple just Google this. I know it's quite in small detail on the screen, but if you just want to Google it, you can find this yourself. I actually have one saved onto my desktop. But it is an amazing tool to incorporate language into identifying what we are feeling in the emotions. So if I just ask you again the question, how are you feeling today? However, if you start to use the emotions wheel, we can start to really specify and get really clear with actually how we are feeling. So at the start of the, not the start, in the center of the wheel, they're perhaps more like simplified language that we often relate to. So yeah, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling happy, cool. However, when we move further to the edge of the circle, we can get much more specific. So if you're feeling more successful, if you're feeling respected, if you're feeling courageous, if you're feeling creative, like obviously on the other end of the scale, that's really, really helpful as well. So in terms of that anger that might be showing up or recognizing in your body, how we can move across to that outer circle to really specify what is going on. So you might be feeling disrespected, you might be feeling betrayed, you might be feeling furious. Again, welcoming in this information to allow us to then take the best course of action. Because if we're just saying we're angry, that might be relevant, that might be okay to just express in that moment. However, we get super specific, it helps us move the sensation of the emotion and understand it into a language, and therefore we can translate that into information and take action from it. The simplest step for first of all is just having that on your desktop, checking in with it, even just a couple of times a week, to really expand your vocabulary to understand how you're feeling and be able to use that information. So that's step one. So second after that is our body. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I study in somatics. So I love the body. It is just a wealth of knowledge, and it is so powerful when we are actually able to tune into what our body is telling us. So especially in the workplace, especially in those harder, more uncomfortable, difficult moments that we've been discussing. Because as we know, and as I tried to do for so many years, putting on that smiling face, internalizing our stress, pretending everything's fine when it's really, really not, or moving into those people-pleasing behaviors is completely repressing our emotions. And that doesn't mean you have the green card and saying like, I'm just going to get really upset, I'm just going to get really expressive and reveal everything. No, it's that middle ground and saying, again, taking responsibility and understanding what control you have in yourself to move through different emotional states. So if you're feeling something, trusting that you have that ability to navigate that, be with that emotion, but then also understand how to process it. Because when we dismiss emotional responses and physical sensations, we are intellectualizing our intuition. And sometimes we just need to let the storyline go. We just need to think about what that feeling is and not put a story associating with it. So to help you on your way with this here is some body sensations. So thinking about a different, I said different, but I think I mean difficult. In difficult moments, but to be fair, different also works. You can always think of happy moments as well. But in difficult moments, specifically in work, because I know I'm touching on these examples throughout this whole session today, thinking about that time that you just wrote about or that you've been thinking about in this past hour. Now thinking about how does your body feel in those moments? And when I say how does your body feel, try not to intellectualize it. Looking across at this list of words, I know that there's only a few there and you can probably expand on them much more, but thinking about those descriptive words. Does it feel frozen? Does it feel tight? Do you feel hot? Do you feel cold? Do you feel shivery? Do you feel heavy? Do you feel blocked? What are some of those words that are coming through on that sensational level? And then the second step of this is where. Where in your body do you feel this? So by that, I mean specifically which body part. And there's probably multiple things going on, but just pick one or two at a time. Focusing on where in your body you are feeling that. So for me, my heart would go through the roof. It would start to race. My stomach would probably get really, really tight. I often shiver, even though I'm really hot. My whole body is like shaking a little. It's like I'm cold, but it's not. It's just like this automatic response. My mouth might get quite dry. The list can go on, but I'll stop there. Moving back to that stomach. So a really nice practice to do, especially in the moment, especially when you're kind of flooded and you're feeling that heightened emotion, is to bring your awareness back to your body. And by that, I simply mean taking your hand and putting it on whichever body part. So for me, in that instance, it would be putting my hand onto my stomach. I'm consciously taking my brain away from the panic or away from thinking what I'm going to have to say to this person or what I'm going to have to do or how I'm going to have to explain myself, and just pausing and moving my attention for a few seconds down into my body and breathing through it, rather than repeating and kind of heightening everything. It's like slowing everything down and thinking, how can I shift this state? How can I release some of that tension through my own conscious focus? Because we are constantly, again, in this feedback loop. So if our body is going into a certain state of panic, whether that be flooded by certain hormones, so cortisol is probably reacting in you right now as well. So everything is getting ready to fight. It's ready to really focus. That's all well and good. But as a response, our brain then goes, okay, danger. I need to think of the worst case scenario. I need to think of every different option under the sun of how to fix this. Whereas sometimes we just need to take a breath and say, okay, I'm safe, I'm okay, I can move this emotion, I can calm things down. And when our body is feeling a little less tense, so if we're moving from an 8 or 9 down to even just a 5 or 6, then our story and our brain will respond. It's that constant feedback loop. So you have so much more control than you think you do by focusing first into your body. So that's one thing. But of course, you can always just get up, physically move around, go for a walk, even if that's just over to the coffee station or going to your fridge, like going to stretch, pushing some energy out through your body. So pushing your feet down into the floor if you're sat at your desk, or even just squeezing and releasing your hands and different body parts. There's so many different tools, but really thinking about that. What is that emotion? How is it showing up in my body? And what ability do I have to shift and move through this? Okay, so final step here. So just like I was mentioning just a little bit earlier, in catching yourself in those moments where things are perhaps escalating and that emotional reaction is coming up and it's continuing. So instead, we have so much power to pause that. And this is a really nice step-by-step way of moving through that. So moving from reaction to response. And we can think about it in terms of reframing. So sort of questioning that narrative, so reframing your information. But really it connects into the body as well. So first of all, you're thinking about observing the thought. So like we were doing before, like writing down actually what's happened, like this person's really annoyed me, or this situation's ridiculous, like I shouldn't be asked to be doing that. Observing that thought, not acting on it. And then coming back to the emotion. So feeling into that emotion. By feeling into it, I just mean not trying to distract yourself, not going onto social media, not going for a nice snack, not going to gossip or share that and rant and rave at someone else. Being with yourself for a few moments to feel that emotion, name it, using that emotions wheel, naming that emotion, bringing some power and authority into yourself, perhaps writing it down to separating it from your body. And the key here is disrupting it. So on a chemical level, our emotional responses happen for 90 seconds. Anything after that, we are feeding into it with our mind. So on a chemical level, we are given that emotion, given that chemical response for 90 seconds only. So if we can wait out that 90 seconds, or if we can move, whether that be like a healthier, like I said, distraction from the situation, or just pausing and healthily distracting yourself in some way for 90 seconds, then it gives yourself the best ability and the best chance to move through the final steps, which is questioning. So getting curious. So that initial response and reaction that's coming in, that thought process that's coming in your mind, what is that thought and emotion really showing you? So questioning that truth, like, do you have all the evidence here? Do I need to think of another person's perspective? Do I need to collate some other information to really understand this situation? Is my initial reaction something that I want to continue with? Accepting without judgment. So I've mentioned a few times around here, around that self-compassion piece. And then finally, you're getting the choice to respond, or if you want to, reframe. So using that information that you've now received, you've perhaps calmed your body, you've perhaps think, hey, that other person probably didn't intend it that way. I'm going to respond in a much more calmer and thoughtful way, moving into that reframe instead. Wonderful. So we've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap everything up because we've covered a lot. I know people are writing some notes, which is wonderful to see. So I'm sure there's lots of things to reflect on. However, we always watch a lot of workshops, we read a lot of books. There is so much information to take in. Let's simplify it. What is just one thing that you're going to take from today's session? What's that number one thing that's standing out? And it doesn't have to be something huge or dramatic. And it could have simply been a simple reminder being like, I need to do a bit more of that. Simplifying those things to make it fully possible and bringing in that confident self and that vision that you had at the start of today, and putting that into action. So writing that one thing down for yourself. So just making a note, holding yourself accountable. Amazing. Oh, Deepali's, but I already ordered an emotion wheel poster on Amazon. I love that. The speed of the action. She's like, tick, already done. That's incredible. I need one of those. Need to move from desktop to full poster. Haven't bought a poster in a few years. Thanks for this, Lizzie. The emotion wheel is great. Disrupt the feeling and choosing how to respond, reframe. Absolutely. Yeah, if anybody's got any other, doesn't have to be questions, or yeah, just main takeaways or thoughts, what was coming up for you. Also, I love the recognition of physicality of emotions. Yeah, always forgotten. So tuning in, there's so much information going on, but remembering so much of it is held in our body and how much actual power and control that we do have over that. So we don't need to be at the, succumbing to our first initial reaction. It's not something that we always have to respond in that way. We have a lot more choice to change our response and reactions and build our confidence in different ways. I just downloaded the wheel too. It's a great tool. Sometimes I just feel something, my body's like, oh, you feel something, and then just opening it up and being like, okay, what's going on? And then finding that exact word. I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling this. But it just gives that kind of
It's
language.
definitely a really useful one, and I think for me as well, it's focusing first on our bodies. It was such an interesting thought that I never really internalized, I never really prioritized. That it's really good to first check in with our body and see how we're feeling and work on that from that angle. So I think that was really powerful for me as well.
Amazing. Love that. Yeah, I'm excited for you guys to go ahead and put those things into practice, because yeah, so many of these tools are about the awareness. It's not something you have to kind of take out of your day and sit there and be like, okay, I need to do this practice each day. It's like, no, these little tools can be used in and out of each day. And it's exciting when you're like, oh, I've used that and I respond in a different, more effective way, and it feels so much more powerful and comfortable in yourself.
Yeah.
Amazing. So yeah, my final thing is just thank you. I've popped my details there. So that's my email address. I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn if you guys use that as well. I post quite a lot, so come along and say hello. And then a final little message is, if your company that you work with could benefit from support in either enhancing emotional intelligence or resilience. These are really, really topical themes that are coming through at the moment to support people in the workplace. I would love to collaborate. So yeah, please do recommend me to your HR, or you can obviously reach out directly on LinkedIn or via email, and we can have a chat. But thank you so much, everyone, for yeah, a really nice, engaging session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lizzie. This has been so eye-opening and so useful, I think, that we can use in so many different areas of our lives. Obviously, workplace is one of the trickiest ones sometimes, because we meet with so many different types of personalities and we have to manage our emotions. But I think we can use this in other parts of our lives as well. So this has been very, very useful. Thank you so much for your time.
You are welcome.
Ladies, do you have any questions at all, or anything that you would like to share? Any observations? Anything? All good. If you need to or want to connect with Lizzie, yeah, she has her LinkedIn there, and also the email address, which you can see. If you want to watch the replay, it was recorded, so it will be edited and then added to the members area, as you know, in a few days' time. So you can always watch it. If you don't write the contact details down or anything like that, that's always a good place to check back on the event that you attended. But other than that, thank you so much, Lizzie. Really, really enjoyed it. This has been so useful.
Lovely. Thank you, ladies. Go enjoy your dinner and the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks
ladies.
a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.